Alright, I got cut off for some reason. My tablet just glitched out, but let's jump back into quantum tunneling. So, the quantum principle for quantum tunneling is a particle can pass through a barrier that, classically, it does not have enough energy to cross. The wave function decays exponentially inside the barrier, but has non-zero amplitude on the other side. In quantum astrology, tunneling explains the breakthroughs that happen during difficult transits. A Saturn-Pluto transit creates a barrier, a period of intense pressure, limitation, and transformation that seems impassable. Classically, the client does not have enough energy to cross it, but quantum tunneling says the probability wave penetrates the barrier. Even when all visible evidence says the situation is stuck, the wave function has non-zero amplitude on the other side. Breakthroughs happen not because the client overcomes the barrier through force, but because the probability field finds a way through. When a client is in the middle of a difficult transit, remind them that the barrier is not a wall, it is a probability filter. The wave is already on the other side. Their job is not to break through, but to allow the tunneling to occur by staying in the process. Decoherence. When a quantum system interacts with its environment, the superposition collapses and the system takes on a definite state. Okay? Now let's look at our astrological application here. In quantum astrology, decoherence is the moment when a possibility becomes an event. A transit creates a superposition of outcomes. Many possibilities exist simultaneously, but when the client takes action, makes a decision, or the environment responds, the superposition decoheres into a single outcome. This is why timing matters. The longer a superposition persists, the more environmental interactions it accumulates, and the more likely it is to decoherence into a specific event. The art of forecasting is reading the decoherence gradient, which possibilities are closest to collapsing into events. Help the client identify which possibilities are closest to decoherence. These are the ones that have accumulated the most environmental interaction. The ones that feel most ready, the client's choices are the measurement that collapses the wave. And right here is the uncertainty cone. Forecast probability disperses over time. Timing precision trades off with mean precision. So as we can see here, we start off with right now. There's Mercury retrograde, there's Saturn square, there's Jupiter trine, and there's Uranus conjunction. And we see the time is right there on the bar. So starting at 0, that's now. 2 is going to be Mercury retrograde. 4 is going to be Saturn square. 6 is going to be Jupiter trine. 8 is going to be Uranus conjunction. And 10 is where we cut off. This is quantum tunneling, breakthrough through apparently impassable Saturn-Pluto barriers. So as we can see, this is our key. So this is incoming probability wave. I'll just use the darker blue for this right here, transmitted wave breakthrough, and then gold for tunneling and exponential decay. So right here, there's that big Saturn barrier, and then the breakthrough occurs not too long after. This break at 6, technically I'd say that's like 5 into like 6.5-ish, and then 7. But then the breakthrough comes right there at 8 during Uranus conjunction. Decoherence funnel, from superposition of possibilities to collapsed lived event. So as we can see on the bottom, we have our decoherence, possibility collapses into lived event, and then there's observation in the middle. Attention narrows the field, observer effect activates, and at the very top, superposition. Multiple possibilities coexist as probability waves. Alright, let's get into planetary probability fields. So, essentially my tablet, each of the 10 solar system bodies is reimagined as a quantum field. So, probability distribution that extends through space and time, interacting with other fields to produce the complex interference pattern we experience as life. Below, each planet receives an original codename and a quantum astrological reading of its forecasting behavior. Here's a planetary entanglement network. Chart factors that have interacted become quantum correlated. On the bottom here, we see strong entanglement being lesser than 0.6, and our moderate entanglement is going to be 0.3 through 0.6. It is higher. And we'll notice there's Mars and Pluto. Their moderate entanglement. There's Jupiter and the Sun. There's Sun and Mars. There's Venus and Jupiter. There's Mercury and Pluto, Neptune and Moon. And then with our strong entanglements, we see Uranus and Venus, Uranus and Mercury, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune. Also, the moderate entanglement. Oh, I think I actually misspoke. So, blue is a strong entanglement and purple is a moderate entanglement. I just get so excited to speak about astrology. I just stumble and bumble. It's crazy. But that's also Mercury and Pisces. So, Sun. Let's talk about it. The field function, as well as signal domain. So, Sun is a quantum field of selfhood, the attractor that gives the psyche its coherence and direction. In forecasting, the Sun's transits represent moments when the wave function of identity recoheres. A transit to the Sun does not change who you are, it changes the phase relationship between your core frequency and the environment. A Saturn transit to the Sun introduces a boundary condition. The wave must pass through a narrower aperture, and what emerges is more focused, more defined, but temporarily lower in amplitude. A Jupiter transit amplifies the field. The wave spreads, the identity expands, and the probability of bold action increases. Identity, coherence, vitality, creative purpose, visible self-expression. Alright? Going on to the Moon, we'll see that Moon is the emotional substrate as a continuously evolving wave function, always in flux, always measurable, but never fully predictable. In forecasting, lunar transits are the fastest moving waves in the system. The Moon's phases create interference patterns with slower planetary waves, producing emotional tides that rise and fall over days rather than months. A Uranus transit to the Moon introduces a discontinuity. The emotional wave function suddenly shifts phase, and what was stable becomes volatile. This is not a breakdown, it is a quantum jump to a new emotional baseline. You see the Moon is signaling emotional weather, instinct, nurturing, and somatic intelligence. Alright, Mercury. So, Mercury is the cognitive interface as an information carrier wave, transmitting, encoding, and decoding the data of experience. In forecasting, Mercury retrogrades are the most recognizable quantum event in astrology. The information wave reverses phase. This is not a malfunction, it is a natural oscillation. During retrograde, the wave does not carry less information, it carries different information. It loops back, reviews, and re-encodes. A transit of Mercury over a natal planet creates a temporary information superhighway. The bandwidth between two systems increases, and exchange accelerates. So communication, cognition, data processing, and nervous system. Venus. The magnetic field of desire as an attraction amplitude, the probability that two systems will resonate and bond. In forecasting, Venus transits alter the attraction amplitude of the field. A Venus-Jupiter transit expands the amplitude. Everything becomes more attractive, everything becomes more magnetic, more probable. The danger is overextension of the field, too many resonances, too many attractions, and the signal-to-noise ratio drops. In a Venus-Saturn transit narrows the field, fewer resonances but deeper ones. The attraction amplitude decreases in breadth but increases in depth. Venus. Love, value, aesthetics, magnetic attraction, financial resonance. Mars. The drive to action as a kinetic impulse, the force that converts potential energy into motion. In forecasting, Mars transits are activation events. They convert standing waves into traveling waves. A Mars transit over a natal planet is a kinetic injection. The system receives energy and must move. A Mars-Pluto transit is the most intense kinetic event in the system. The impulse is so strong that it can overcome barriers that previously seemed impassable. The system does not merely move, it transforms through movement. Drive, action, conflict, physical energy, initiative. Jupiter. The principle of growth as expansion probability, the tendency of the wave function to spread, to occupy more space, to include more possibilities. In forecasting, Jupiter transits increase the expansion probability of whatever they touch. A Jupiter transit over the 10th house expands the probability of career visibility. Over the 7th, it expands the probability of partnership. Expansion is not guaranteed, it is a probability increase, okay? So the client must still make the measurement, take the action, that collapses the wave into event. Jupiter opens the door and the client walks through it. Growth, opportunity, faith, wisdom, expansion. Saturn. Principle of structure, the boundary operator, the force that defines limits, creates containers, and gives shape to the wave function. In forecasting, Saturn transits are boundary events. They introduce constraints that the wave must adapt to. Saturn transit over a natal planet narrows the probability field, bringing fewer options but more definition. This is not punishment, it is crystallization. The system loses degrees of freedom but gains structural integrity. Saturn returns the most significant boundary event. The wave function is compressed and re-emitted in a more coherent, more durable form. With, of course, Saturn being a structure, discipline, limitation, mastery, and endurance. Uranus, the principle of change, is a discontinuity event, the quantum jump that shifts the system to a new state without passing through the intermediate states. In forecasting, Uranus transits are the most genuinely unpredictable events in the system. Uranus does not move the wave gradually, it causes a phase transition. The system jumps from one state to another without traversing the space between. This is why Uranus transits feel sudden. They are sudden in the quantum sense. The system was in state A, and now it is in state B, and there was no path from A to B, only a leap. So Uranus is innovation, disruption, liberation, sudden change, and awakening. Neptune. Principle of transcendence as field dissolution, gradual erosion of boundaries that allows the wave function to merge with the larger field. In forecasting, Neptune transits are the hardest to measure because they dissolve the very boundaries that make measurement possible. A Neptune transit over a natal planet softens, blurs, and opens the field. The probability distribution flattens, outcomes become less specific, more permeable. This can manifest as inspiration, the field opens to receive new info, or as confusion, the field loses its definition and cannot process input accurately. Spirituality, imagination, dissolution, idealism, and transcendence. Pluto, the principle of transformation is a phase transition, deep structural change that reorganizes the system at the most fundamental level. In forecasting, Pluto transits are the deepest events in the system. They do not change the wave, they change the medium through which the wave travels. A Pluto transit is not a surface event, it reaches into the substrate and reorganizes it. The system emerges from a Pluto transit with a different fundamental structure, and this is why Pluto transits feel faded. The old structure was not merely changed, it was composted, and what grew in its place was not predictable from the old state. Transformation, power, death, and rebirth, the unconscious, depth. Alright, transit forecasting architecture. Transits are time-evolving probability fields. As planets move through the sky, their waves interact with the natal chart's standing wave pattern, creating new interference, new amplifications, and new possibilities. The art of transit forecasting is reading these interactions as probability windows rather than deterministic events. Probability cloud horoscope wheel. Each house carries a different probability density. And forecast windows, rather than predicting specific dates, quantum astrology forecasts use probability windows, periods during which the probability of a theme manifesting is elevated. Each window has a build phase, probability rising, peak phase, maximum probability, and decoherence phase, probability collapsing into an event or dissipating. Excuse me. Alright. Now we have phase, wave behavior, client experience, and forecasting note here. First phase, it says build with amplitude increasing, sense of something approaching, intuition activates. Do not predict the event yet, map the probability field. Peak, maximum amplitude, theme is dominant, choices feel urgent. Highest probability of manifestation, observer effect is critical. Decoherence, wave collapsing. Event crystallizes, possibility becomes reality. The measurement has been made. Read what emerged. Dissipation, amplitude decreasing, integration, the event is absorbed into the life. Map, new standing wave pattern. What changed permanently? And let's look at the quantum tunneling in transits here. Read this. So, during the peak phase of a difficult transit, whether it's Saturn, Pluto, or Uranus, the probability wave encounters a barrier. The client feels stuck, blocked, or unable to move forward. Classical forecasting says, wait it out. Quantum forecasting says, the wave is already tunneling through. The breakthrough is not a future event, it is a present probability that is not yet decohered. The client's job is not to force the breakthrough, but to create the conditions for it to emerge. Alright, 12-sign quantum forecasts. Below are 12 reflective forecasts, one per zodiac sign. These are generic and conceptual, not personalized readings. Each sign receives a probability theme, a constructive wave, what is amplifying, a shadow interference, what is creating noise, an observer question, and a quantum action prompt. So since these are quite a bit, I'll actually go so just completely. Okay, let's do this. Each sign receives a probability theme, constructive wave, what is amplifying, a shadow interference, what is creating noise, an observer question, and a quantum action prompt. So forecast intensity heat map, illustrative probability distribution across signs and life dimensions. We see all of our 12 signs here from Aries to Pisces, as well as our sections, career, love, growth, challenge, and intuition. And right here is the probability intensity scale. So right there at the bottom, of course, is 0.0, then goes to 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, all the way to 1.0. I was going to get into these specifically for the zodiac signs, but I think we'll go into this instead, so we can actually show you the example horoscope reading. So, a sample quantum astrological forecast reading using a hypothetical transit scenario, and this demonstrates how the QFI formula, quantum concepts, and interpretive framework combine to produce a forecast that is probabilistic, observer-dependent, and actionable. So, our scenario, transit Uranus square natal moon. Uranus discontinuity event forms a square complex interference to the natal moon, emotional wave function. QFI calculation. See, T is our transit strength, equals 0.85. Uranus is slow moving, and the square is exact within 1 degree. A, being our aspect tension, equals 0.60. The square creates complex interference, not destructive, but not harmonious. H, being house relevance, equals 0.80. The moon rules the 4th house of home and family, a high relevance domain. D, dignity coherence, 0.50. The moon is in Capricorn detriment, so its wave function is already strained. And O, observer readiness, 0.45. The client is aware of the transit but resistant to its implications. So we see our QFI with all of that gives us 9.2%. Indicates a low to moderate forecast intensity. This does not mean the transit is weak. Uranus square moon is one of the most disruptive transits in astrology. It means that the probability of the transit manifesting as a concrete recognizable event is currently low, primarily because the observer readiness factor, O equals 0.45, is suppressing the wave's collapse. The emotional wave function is entering a discontinuity field. Moon in Capricorn has been operating in a structured, controlled mode. Emotions processed through architecture and competence. Uranus is square, introduces a phase transition. The wave must jump to a new state. The system is approaching a quantum leap in emotional processing. So, we can understand that the superposition includes sudden relocation, family pattern disruption, emotional liberation, nervous system reset, unexpected domestic change, and or a break in a long-held emotional habit. All of these possibilities coexist. The client's resistance to low O factor is keeping the wave in superposition longer, which actually increases the eventual amplitude of the collapse. The longer a wave is suppressed, the more energy it accumulates. The build phase is active, the probability field is dense but has not decohered. Peak phase will arrive when Uranus reaches exactitude. Client has a window of opportunity to increase the O factor to engage with the transit consciously, which will allow the wave to collapse into a chosen outcome rather than an imposed one. The client's resistance is not the problem, it is the measurement that is collapsing the wrong possibility. By resisting emotional disruption, the client is actually sustaining the probability of disruption. Observation collapses the wave toward what is observed, even if the observation is, I don't want this. The quantum action prompt is, reframe the observation. Instead of observing disruption, observe liberation. The wave will collapse toward what is measured. So, here's a closing synthesis real quick. And a quick disclaimer I forgot to give, because it's usually at the bottom of the video. So this codex is an original creative framework that uses quantum mechanics concepts as interpretive metaphors for astrological practice. It does not claim scientific validity for astrology, nor does it assert that quantum mechanics literally explains astrological phenomena. Quantum mechanics is used here as a rich source of language and imagery for describing the probabilistic, observer-dependent, and nonlinear dynamics of astrological forecasting. Astrology is presented as a symbolic and reflective art. This document is not a personalized reading. It should not be used as the basis for major life decisions. For personal guidance on health, relationships, career, or finances, consult qualified professionals. Okay, so a few things. The chart is a probability map, not a blueprint. Observation changes the outcome. Uncertainty is a feature, not a bug. Breakthroughs are probabilistic, not deterministic. Everything is entangled. These are the 5 key things you need to remember from this video. Thank you for watching this. With peace and love, I'll see you in the next one. Piscean out.